signal in the void. The galaxy had known war for centuries, but nothing like this. It didn't begin with a fleet or a declaration or even a shot. It began with a blip, a strange echo in the gravitational field just outside Sector 17B of the Elysian Drift, a sector no ship dared enter unless it was looking to disappear. A dead zone, a region the Zarn Dominion had locked down for decades without explanation. When the anomaly registered on their deep space sensors, alarms blinked red across the observation chamber. At first, the technicians assumed it was a glitch. Space was full of noise, drifting rocks, faulty readings, dust. But this was no random drift. It was moving with purpose. "Run it again," Commander Threll barked, his eel-like fingers twitching anxiously over the crystalline control slab embedded into the floor. The technician obeyed, recalibrating the scan. Confirm mass displacement equivalent to a Class C battlecruiser trajectory directly toward us. Threll's slitted eyes narrowed into a surgical gaze. "There are no Dominion fleets in that direction," he hissed. "That sector is empty." Which meant only one thing: unknown contact. Within minutes, the Zarn flagship Cray shifted to full alert. Fighters launched like hornets from under its armored hull. Shields surged to life. All 6 Dreadnought-class cannons rotated toward the anomaly. The bridge lights dimmed under battle protocol. Tension thickened the air. And then above the holotable at the heart of the bridge, the flickering projection of Lord Vacheron materialized, High Strategist of the Dominion, encased in ceremonial Ketan armor that gleamed like obsidian fire. "If it's another upstart species testing our border," he snarled, voice sharp as a blade, "make an example of them." But this wasn't an upstart species. Not when the anomaly cleared. Not when the thing at its center emerged from the distortion. Gas rippled through the command deck. One technician stumbled back from their console. It wasn't biological. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't recognizable. It was a ship, angular, brutal, forged in fury. Its hull was matte black, scorched with deep battle scars. Its silhouette wasn't sleek. It was jagged. Hateful, armored like a beast, a relic, a warning. Etched into its prow an ancient human standard, UHS Revenant. For a moment, no one moved. A human warship, in Dominion space, impossible. Humanity was driven to extinction, Vacheron spat. During the Cradle Siege, that ship should be dust. Someone whispered what they were all thinking. Ghosts don't lock targeting systems, because that's what the ship had done. Locked on, and it was still coming. The ghost ship, UHS Revenant. The anomaly cleared, and the Zarn command ship fell into a hush so profound it felt like the void outside had swallowed all sound. Suspended in space like a nightmare frozen mid-roar hovered the warship. It didn't glide like most Dominion ships, sleek and elegant, organic in shape and function. This one looked angry, forged from jagged edges, matte black plating, scorched and scarred by 1,000 battles. Every inch of it was brutal, ugly, and purposeful. Dominion sensors scrambled to analyze the ship's design. No match. Not in their records. Not in the captured data of 100 conquered systems. It was alien but not unknown. A technician's voice cracked the silence. Markings identified human standard script. Reads UHS Revenant. No, Lord Vacheron's voice was low, but it carried a venom that sent chills through every spine on the bridge. That's impossible. Humanity had been erased. At least that was the official Dominion record. The Cradle Siege had seen to that. Earth, humanity's home, had been reduced to ash and oceans of poison. Their cities turned to craters. Their people hunted across the stars until none were left to bury the dead. And yet the ship was real. The name Revenant wasn't just symbolic. It was literal. Ghosts don't lock targeting systems, someone muttered, because that's what the ship had done. A pulse swept from the Revenant, subtle but unmistakable, a weapons lock. On board the ghost ship, Captain Leila Monroe stood silently on the command deck. She wasn't tall, she wasn't imposing, but something in her presence bent the room around her like gravity. Her hands were clasped behind her back, boots set apart in a stance of unwavering confidence. Her eyes glowed faintly, not from ego, but from the neural implants woven into her skull. They thrummed with data streams and tactical overlays, feeding her every heartbeat of the battlefield. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. Behind her, the bridge was a quiet ballet of motion. No chatter, no confusion. The crew moved as one, fast, precise, and lethal. "Their sensors are locked on us," her lieutenant reported, eyes on the data screen. Leila's lips curled. Not a smile, not quite. "Let them watch." She stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Make them remember who we are." The ship responded like it was waiting to be unleashed. Panels along the Revenant's hull hissed and slid open, revealing its arsenal. Railguns longer than entire enemy corvettes, plasma lances that pulsed with volatile energy, Missile silos primed with warheads far more advanced than anything in the Dominion's databases. And something else, something buried deeper, humming like the core of a star, the Trinity Cannon. It glowed behind reinforced containment walls, pulsing red with a rhythm that seemed alive. It wasn't just power. It was potential annihilation barely leashed. The Zarn fleet didn't wait for a declaration of intent. "Open fire!" Threll screeched. A storm of energy lit up the sector. Plasma bolts, missiles, ion beams, all screaming toward the human warship. But the Revenant was already moving. Not like a battleship, not like anything designed. It moved like a predator, gliding between incoming fire, spinning on vector thrusters, cutting angles no Dominion ship could replicate. The first railgun fired. One shot, one kill. A Dominion frigate split in two, its pieces tumbling in silence, venting fire and crew into the cold dark. The second shot came half a second later, this time at a destroyer. The impact reduced the ship to molten chunks, its reactor flaring once before vanishing into debris. The Dominion fleet faltered. These weren't tactics they recognized. This wasn't war. This was butchery. On the Revenant's bridge, Leila Monroe watched with the calm of a surgeon in an operating room. Every kill was a cut, every maneuver a slice. "This is not possible," Threll shouted aboard the Dominion command vessel, his voice shrill. "Humanity was supposed to be extinct. Then why is that thing wearing their flag?" another officer cried out. No one answered, not even Lord Vacaroon, because deep down he knew the answer. They had underestimated humanity. They always had. And now that mistake had a name: Revenant. The ghost of Earth. She had been a soldier once, a daughter, a survivor. Now she was a ghost. Captain Leila Monroe stood at the edge of her command deck like she belonged there, as if the cold metal under her boots had grown around her. Her black uniform coat was worn at the edges, frayed near the cuffs. The earth patch on her shoulder was half burned, but it still bore weight. Weight that came with history, with blood, and memory. Her neural implants buzzed lightly, syncing her vision with the ship's systems. She saw everything: trajectory models, threat angles, reactor output. But beyond the tech, there was something older, something deeper in her gaze. Rage, the kind that didn't flare up, the kind that simmered for years. The bridge around her was a mix of old Earth tech and scavenged Dominion parts patched together in exile, hardened by necessity. Nothing was polished. Everything had scars, just like its captain. Multiple signatures down her, tactical officer reported. Dominion units are pulling back to defensive formation. Leila didn't nod. She didn't need to. Instead, she moved toward the front viewport, where the stars stretched like shattered glass across the dark. She remembered another sky one that burned green during the final hours of the Cradle Siege. Earth's cities had lit up, not with lights but with fire. Orbital strikes had rained down on New Alexandria. Oceans boiled, families screamed. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a young lieutenant named Monroe had dragged the charred body of her brother from the rubble, whispering apologies he'd never hear. That was the day she died. Not physically, but the person she was, the idealist, the patriot, the believer in peace, had burned away in that fire. What remained was steel. She turned toward the holographic map at the center of the bridge. Red dots for Dominion, blue for her. There were far more red. Didn't matter. Status of the Trinity Cannon, she asked. Chief Engineer Voss leaned over a cracked console, grease streaked his forehead. Stable for now. We're bleeding power from 3 lines just to keep it cool. Good, she said. We're not done. He blinked at her. You really plan to use that thing again? Leila's lips moved just enough to suggest something between a smirk and a threat. That cannon exists for one reason: to make the enemy remember. That was the point, wasn't it? The Dominion had buried Earth, laughed as her people scattered, erased entire libraries from galactic memory. Even the maps had changed, but Earth hadn't died. It had adapted, it had endured. It had built a warship that wasn't just a machine, it was a memorial. Every plate of its armor held the name of a fallen city. Every weapon carried the vengeance of a species that had been told it was over. And at its helm stood Leila Monroe. She didn't want glory. She wanted the galaxy to never forget again. "Ma'am," the comms officer said, "suddenly we're intercepting Zarn command chatter. They're calling us a phantom of vengeance." Leila's eyes narrowed. "Let's show them how real ghosts fight." The first shot from hell. There were no drums of war, no heroic symphonies, just the silence before cataclysm. Inside the Revenant's core chamber, a low hum resonated like the heartbeat of something old and angry. The lights dimmed throughout the ship as power rerouted into the cannon, buried in the ship's spine. The Trinity Cannon, a weapon built in exile, untested in battle, too dangerous for simulations. Its energy source wasn't standard fusion or antimatter. It was something darker, The Revenant siphoned dark matter from subspace, a technique no other human vessel had ever survived using. The energy harvested from the edges of physics had no safety protocols, no shutdown sequence. It simply was unchained. Leila stood in the command center watching the glow of the reactor intensify through reinforced windows. Her crew moved in tense silence. No one spoke, no one breathed too loudly. They all knew once this weapon fired, there would be no more turning back. Charge at 89%. Voss reported sweat dripping from his temples. Field integrity is holding. For now. Target, Leila asked. Cray said her tactical officer, the Zarn Command Dreadnought, the same ship that had presided over the Cradle Siege. She could almost see it looming there in the void, surrounded by sleek Dominion escorts, proud in its armor and banners, the heart of a fleet that believed it was unbreakable. Perfect! Leila's voice cut like a knife through the thick air. Prepare to fire. Alarms flared as the final sequence initiated. The ship groaned as if alive, as if straining to contain what it was about to unleash. Then, the cannon fired. There was no sound in space, but aboard the Revenant, it felt like the universe screaming. A beam did not shoot forth. There was no visible explosion. Instead, reality tore. A rupture in the vacuum, like the laws of physics, had been stabbed and bled. Gravity, a spherical distortion, expanded outward from the Revenant's bow, collapsing space inward, drawing in mass and light, bending star fields behind it like a lens gone mad. The Cray didn't explode. It folded. One second it was a dreadnought. The next it was a contortion of metal and light, its hull screaming silently as it collapsed into itself. Shields flickered and died. Plasma batteries sparked and disintegrated. The entire warship bent like paper in a firestorm, and then vanished into a single point of darkness. Gone, not destroyed. Erased. Aboard the Revenant, systems flickered wildly. The ship's structural integrity wavered as the backwash of energy slammed into its hull. Engineers shouted over comms. Coolant systems screamed warnings. One of the secondary capacitors burst, sending a cascade of sparks raining across Deck 3. And yet the ship held, just barely. Leila gritted her teeth as static buzzed in her neural implants. For a second, her vision went white. Then the light stabilized, gravity returned. The bridge flickered back to life. She straightened her code eyes, never leaving the tactical display. The Cray's icon was gone. In its place was a black hole, small and rapidly collapsing, pulling in the last fragments of twisted Dominion metal. Gasps echoed across the bridge. Dear God, someone whispered. Correction, Leila said coldly. Dear Earth. Around the Revenant, the Zarn fleet descended into chaos. Smaller ships scattered like insects. One cruiser attempted to charge the Revenant in desperation, only to be gutted mid-flight by a precision railgun volley. The Revenant moved like it was alive, hungry. On the Dominion command network, panic reigned. This is not possible. The Revenant is using forbidden tech. Evacuate, evacuate. Inside the ship, Voss clutched a railing as he ran diagnostics. We've destabilized the core slightly. That shot took everything the capacitor banks had. How many more, Leila asked? 2 maybe. Before we burn out the ship or the crew? She nodded once. That's enough. She turned to the viewport again, watching the wreckage swirl and vanish into the black scar they had left behind. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate, because this wasn't victory. This was a warning, the kind written not in blood, but in the deletion of everything that dared to exist on the wrong side of memory. And it had just begun. Memories of Earth, before the Revenant, before the Trinity, cannon before the screams of dying Dominion ships echoed in her implants. There had been silence. The kind of silence that followed fire. Leila Monroe stood alone in the observation chamber, staring out at the void beyond the hull. Stars shimmered like cold memories, distant and uncaring. She had just erased an entire dreadnought from existence and felt nothing. No triumph, no vengeance fulfilled. Only memory, and memory hurt. She closed her eyes, and the stars burned green. The sky over New Alexandria had turned an unnatural hue in the final hours, sickly and shimmering, like rot-made light. She remembered standing in the crumbled frame of her childhood apartment, its walls cracked, half the ceiling caved in. The orbital bombardment had already begun. Cities had fallen. The Dominion hadn't come to conquer. They had come to erase. A scream tore through the air somewhere in the distance. Maybe a woman, maybe a child, maybe herself. She'd been a lieutenant then. Young, hopeful, wearing clean boots and a pressed uniform. Her commanding officer had said the defensive line would hold. It hadn't. She moved through the ruins, plasma rifle held tight against her chest, boots crunching over glass and ash. Her squad was gone, buried, scattered, burned. She didn't even have time to mourn. The city's AI grid had gone dark. Comms were silent, air smelled like melted steel and cooked concrete. Then she found him, her brother Daniel. He had tried to get their mother out of the city. He hadn't made it. Leila knelt beside his body. His arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. Half his face was gone, vaporized in whatever blast had taken the building down. She didn't cry. Not then. She couldn't. Instead, she pulled his dog tag from his neck, placed it around her own, and whispered something she didn't remember now. Something soft, something broken. A Dominion patrol ship screamed overhead. She ducked behind rubble, heart pounding, vision blurring. That was the moment she died. Not physically, but the person she had been, the officer who believed in orders, in strategy, in the Galactic Accord. She had died there beside Daniel's body with the fire of Earth rising behind her. What crawled out of that ruin wasn't a soldier. It was a memory given form, a ghost too angry to stay buried. Leila opened her eyes. The stars were quiet again. Behind her soft footsteps approached Chief Engineer Voss. His face was smudged with soot. His arm in a sling, a fresh gash across his temple. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer. He leaned beside her, arms folded, staring out into the void with her. "That cannon shot, I think it shook the whole damn sector." "I know. I also know you're not here to admire the view." She hesitated, then reached into her coat and pulled out a piece of scorched metal. It was small, curved, clearly part of something larger. Voss recognized it immediately. "Dog tag," he said. She nodded. "It's his," she whispered. "My brother." For a moment, Voss said nothing. Then he nodded once, solemn. "That why you built this ship?" "No." Her voice was thin. "Distant, I built this ship, so no one forgets what they did." She turned toward him. Her eyes didn't shine, they burned. "They didn't just bomb us, they rewrote history. They called us extinct. They laughed while we buried our dead in the dark corners of forgotten colonies." Voss exhaled slowly, and now she said they remember. But deep down, Leila knew it wasn't enough. One cannon blast, one destroyed ship, one system in chaos. It was only the beginning. Her people hadn't just died, they'd been erased. And now, piece by piece, she would make the galaxy remember what it had buried. Not out of hatred, but because the dead deserved more than silence. The siege of Calvarus Prime. 12 hours after the annihilation of the Cray, the Revenant dropped into high orbit above Calvarus Prime, the Dominion's crown jewel and its lifeline, orbiting a massive gas giant whose rings shimmered with raw ore. Calvarus wasn't just another target, it was the target. The shipyards below produced 60% of the Dominion's active war fleet. Destroying it would do more than cripple the enemy's numbers. It would cut out their heart, but the Revenant wasn't the only one watching. Calvarus was protected by a full defensive ring, 12 orbital war stations, 3 active destroyers, and a planetary defense AI so advanced it once vaporized a pirate fleet in under an hour. And Leila Monroe intended to go straight through the front door. On the bridge, the crew gathered around the hollow table as the plan took shape. "We punched through Sector 8, Leila said, pointing to the most fortified section of the defense ring. Her officers exchanged glances. Some nodded, some swallowed hard. "But that sector's covered by 5 stations," Voss said, already rubbing his temples. "Exactly," Leila replied. "Which is why they'll never expect us to hit it. They'll assume we're trying to slip around the edge." She turned to her weapons officer. "Load the decoy drone. Give it a faulty hyperspace signature. Let it look damaged, confused bait. 2 destroyers will chase it for the kill," someone muttered. "That's the idea." And the Trinity asked Torres, the gunnery chief, dark circles under her eyes. Leila's voice dropped low. "We save it. We hit this core reactor, one shot, one end." No one cheered. No one shouted. There were only quiet nods. These weren't soldiers, they were survivors. And survivors didn't give speeches. They gave plans. The attack began with light. Lasers and flak cannons lit the darkness as the Revenant dropped into firing range. The decoy drone peeled off as planned, smoking and spinning erratically, broadcasting static-laced distress signals. 2 Dominion destroyers took the bait instantly, veering after the drone like predators chasing wounded prey, which left a hole, barely a crack in the wall. Leila took it. "Full burn," she shouted. The Revenant roared. It dove through the gap, railguns firing in all directions, slicing through automated turrets and scattering drones like sparks in a forge. The hull groaned. Shields flickered red. Explosions rippled across the sky, but they kept going. The planetary defense AI locked on within 30 seconds, rerouting turret fire from multiple stations. Plasma blasts scythed across the ship's flank. Deck 3 vented atmosphere. 2 crew members were gone. A secondary railgun overloaded mid-fire, exploding in a burst of flame that scorched Torres across one shoulder. She didn't flinch. "Keep going," Leila roared. "Get us to the core." Through the chaos, the Revenant charged. No formation, no backup. Just fury. The ship rattled with each impact. Warning klaxons howled, smoke filled the bridge, sparks rained from exposed wiring like burning rain. And yet they advanced, because this was what humanity had always done. Not survive, endure. They breached the outer defense ring in under 6 minutes. The inner ring fell in 9. Now they were inside. The Calvarus core reactor hub loomed ahead, a massive pulsating sphere of energy, wrapped in reinforced alloy and shielded magnetic fields. It pulsed like a second sun, glowing blue and green with the heartbeat of an empire. Leila stared at it through the viewport, jaw clenched. Now, Torres aligned the Trinity cannon. The glow behind her was brighter than ever. Systems screamed warnings. The cannon was beyond redline. Fire. The universe screamed again. The blast lit the orbit of Calvarus Prime like a newborn star. Every outpost on the gas giant's moons, every mining rig in the asteroid belt, even ships beyond sensor range all saw it. A moment of unnatural daylight. The core reactor didn't explode. It collapsed. Gravity buckled. Energy fields failed. And then, like an eye closing, the entire hub vanished into a singularity, dragging the remnants of the shipyard's orbital stations and defense satellites into its crushing grip. Everything was pulled inward. Shattered hulls, twisted steel, burnt Zarn bodies. Gone. Then the void snapped. A shockwave erupted, hurling debris across space. The Revenant was thrown backward, tumbling. Consoles shattered. The bridge went dark. Smoke choked the air, and the price of victory revealed itself. Status Leila coughed, struggling to her feet. Voss groaned from the floor. Core integrity at 31%. We've lost propulsion on 2 vectors. Hull breach in Section 5C. Navigation's gone. Can we still move? Like a drunken bear on a minefield. Leila wiped blood from her mouth. So that's a yes. And somehow, even in the chaos, her crew laughed. Because they had done it. They had struck a god's heart and lived. But the victory didn't last long. A proximity alarm howled. New contacts, the sensor officer shouted. 15 ships inbound, Dominion reinforcements. Leila's stomach sank. She staggered to the viewport, looking out past the wreckage. Warp trails ripped into the system. Huge ships, capital class, each bristling with firepower. Voss stared at them, face pale. They're bringing the hammer, he said quietly. And the Revenant had no shields, no weapons, and barely a heartbeat. The galaxy's most dangerous ship was now a wounded beast. And the Dominion, they were coming to finish the job. The broadcast that lit the galaxy. The Revenant was bleeding. Systems flickered. Coolant hissed from ruptured pipes. Sparks danced in the dark smoke, curling like ghosts between the cracked walls of the bridge. The crew moved with bruised bodies and blistered hands, working by instinct, not hope. And outside, the Dominion hammer approached. 15 ships. A full battle sphere. Capital dreadnoughts, cruisers, assault carriers, more firepower than Leila had ever seen in one place since Earthburn. Voss was patching power from life support again. Torres had both hands wrapped in bandages, still manning the manual controls of the last functional railgun. Every screen was red. Every indicator screamed doom. They wouldn't survive another fight, but maybe they didn't need to. Patch me through, Leila said. Her voice was calm. Steady final. The comms officer hesitated to, what captain? Leila turned toward him. All frequencies. The officer blinked, then nodded. Fingers flew across the console. A wave of signal pulsed outward across the sector, across jump gates, relays, satellites, outposts. Anyone within a dozen light minutes would hear her. Allies, enemies, civilians, outlaws, the entire galaxy. And then, her voice, "This is Captain Leila Monroe of the UHS Revenant," she said, standing tall in the smoke-lit bridge, coat torn hair burned at the tips, blood still trickling from her temple. Broadcasting from the ruins of Calvarus Prime, she paused just long enough to let the silence settle. To every soul still fighting, to every colony that remembers Earth, to every outcast, every orphan of the Dominion war machine. Her voice rose. We're still here. Behind her, the bridge crew lifted their eyes. Even the wounded, even the half-conscious, even Voss, who had nearly passed out against a console. They said humanity was extinct, that we were broken, forgotten. But today we reminded them who the hell we are. She turned to the viewport where the Dominion fleet loomed ever closer, casting long shadows over the broken orbit. We're not just fighting back, we're burning their empire to the ground. Her voice dropped low and sharp. We may not live through this, but every second we do, we make them bleed. She leaned forward, staring into the comms array as if she could see through it. If you can hear this, pick up a weapon, steal a ship, hack a drone, sabotage a supply line, do something. Because the Dominion is not invincible. We've proven that. A final breath, a flicker in her eye. Earth lives, humanity endures. We are the storm they were too blind to see coming. She cut the transmission. For a moment, the bridge was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Then Torres chuckled, just a dry sound at first. That's gonna piss someone off. Voss smiled faintly through cracked lips. She lit a fire. They all felt it. They had no shields, no guns, no engine power. But what they had now was something else. Momentum. And then the Galaxy answered. The comm screen blinked. A signal open frequency. Revenant, this is the Dead Reckoner. The voice was gravel and fire. You lit the match. Captain, we're here to pour the fuel. Another ping. This is Wraith 10 Lot of angry bastards out here. Mind if we break some bones with you? Another. This is Echo's Wake. You gave us hope. We're giving back hell. And then another and another. Names from nowhere, ships that weren't supposed to exist. Survivors, pirates, smugglers, exiles, scattered children of Earth who had lived in the cracks of the Dominion for too long. They came, not in gleaming battleships, but in patched hulls, modded cruisers, rusted freighters with weapons strapped to their sides like scars. The Revenant wasn't alone anymore. It was the beacon. Leila didn't speak. She just stared out at the gathering storm ships emerging from the void, like ghosts answering a call. A war was coming, a real one. But not just between fleets. Now it was between memory and oblivion, between extinction and revenge, between silence and a scream that would echo across stars. The battle for the Vertok. The stars dim, not from eclipse or system failure, but from the presence that arrived. The Vertok, a Dominion dreadnought, 77 decks deep, shielded in layered gravity armor, and bearing a weapon designed to break moons. The Solar Lance. It slid into view like a leviathan birthed from shadow. On board high, where Caster Riem stood motionless, his neural hive sight pulling in angles and trajectories from a dozen fields of vision. At once, his voice was granite ground against steel. They're not soldiers, his lieutenant muttered, eyes wide. They fight like ferals. Riem didn't look away. No, he said, they fight like they've already died. And then he pointed to a single icon glowing red in his tactical array. The Revenant is the nerve cut it and the body falls. Inside the battered ship, Leila Monroe stood surrounded by smoke and sparks. Her lips were cracked. Her shoulder bled from a ruptured console strike, but her spine was straight. She felt it. Something had locked onto them. Something old, powerful, deliberate. What is that? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Her sensor tech blinked sweat on his brow. Massive energy spike. They're charging a solar lance. Voss swore that's a planet killer. The bridge fell silent. There was no shielding strong enough to block it. No speed left in their drives to outrun it. The Revenant was a ghost ship, not a sprinter. Unless, Voss, Leila said, suddenly turning. He looked up, still holding a sparking relay in his hands. You still sitting on that core override? I told you never to touch. He hesitated, then nodded. I told you it's unstable. I'm not asking for stable, she said. I'm asking for a miracle. He stared at her for a beat. Then something fierce crossed his expression. All right, he said. You want to dance with the devil? I'll crank the damn music. Below deck, the ship's power core, already howling with residual heat from the Trinity, began to burn again. On the weapons platform, Torres braced herself. Her fingers trembled, burned and taped from earlier fires. Target the Vertok. Leila ordered, don't aim for the hull. Torres looked up. You want the lance? Leila's eyes flashed. I want to rip its heart out. Torres bit her lip, then took a deep breath. She leaned into the manual sights. The Vertok was massive, shielded, moving, but the solar lance, its barrel glowed red, almost primed, was open. She tuned out the alarms, the flickering lights, the smell of metal and blood. The targeting line bounced, twitched. She whispered to it, coaxed it, then squeezed the trigger. The railgun screamed. A tungsten slug the size of a coffin flew across space at 14 kilometers per second. It hit the lance barrel just as it reached full charge. The resulting explosion didn't roar, it rippled. The entire rear quadrant of the Vertok bloomed in chain reaction. Plasma chambers ruptured. Support struts failed. Energy meant to destroy a city tore backward through the dreadnought's spine. Decks collapsed inward like lungs deflating. Escape pods launched, many never made it. 1,000 Dominion elite were turned to vapor in less than 3 seconds. The Vertok cracked and died. Inside the Revenant, no one cheered. They didn't have the breath. Systems were failing. A coolant surge detonated beneath engineering. Artificial gravity buckled, flinging bodies and tools through the corridors. Lights dropped to emergency red. Leila hit the floor hard, pain flashing through her ribs. When gravity returned, she staggered upright. Blood in her mouth, implants flickering at her temples. Status, she shouted. Voss crawled toward the console. Core's holding, but just weapons are gone. If we cough, we melt the reactor's shields. Don't make me laugh. They were floating in ruins. No propulsion. No guns, but they were alive, and the Dominion hammer was broken. Then came a new signal, encrypted, human bandwidth, not from the Resistance fleet, From inside the system, the comms officer frowned. "Captain, this code hasn't been used since before Earth fell." Leila's blood ran cold. "Put it through." The screen shimmered with static, then cleared. A face appeared, older, weathered, eyes like glaciers, a scar running from chin to throat. She knew him. Commander Cassian Rain, EarthCore, a Black Ops Spectre. Thought dead. "Hello, Captain Monroe," he said, voice smooth and measured. "Nice show you put on out here." Leila stared. "You're supposed to be dead." He smiled. "I am officially." She narrowed her eyes. "What do you want?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "To finish what you started." EarthCore rises. The image on the screen didn't flicker anymore. It held, sharp focused. And so did Cassian Rain's eyes. Leila Monroe didn't move, didn't blink. Cassian leaned forward, scarred hands clasped under his chin. "We've been watching you," he said. "Every move, every battle, every broadcast." Leila's jaw tightened. "Then you've been hiding." "Preparing," he countered smoothly. "You've done well, but you've stirred the hive. The Dominion's going to hit back hard." Behind him, the shadows shifted. Uniformed personnel moved quietly in what looked like a clandestine command center, deep underground or buried in asteroid rock. Holograms hovered in the air. Fleet schematics, weapon and loadouts. Supply lines. Leila felt her stomach twist. "You had all this," she whispered, "while the rest of us died." Cassian didn't flinch. "We had to ensure something survived. Humanity needed a future one with teeth." She stepped closer to the screen, voice sharp now. "You let Earth burn. You let the colonies fall. We let the weak burn," he said coldly, "and now only the strong remain. Like you." Her silence was colder than any vacuum. "We're offering you an arsenal, Captain," he continued. "The last sleeper fleets, black site weapons, intelligence networks that survived the cradle. With your leadership, we can take the fight to the Dominion and end them." She stared and understood. This wasn't an offer. It was a recruitment. He didn't want to fight beside her. He wanted to control her. "You want to use the Revenant?" she said quietly. "Use me as a symbol." Cassian's smile didn't fade. "Symbols win wars." She stepped back from the console, the glow of the transmission casting shadows across her bruised face. Around her, the bridge crew watched in silence. No one spoke. Because they all knew what this was. Another leash, another chain, another tyrant just with a familiar flag. "I'll think about it," she said coldly. Cassian nodded once. "Don't take too long. There are other captains I can call." The screen went dark. For a long time, no one said anything. Then Voss, bandaged and limping, finally broke the silence. "Do you believe him?" "Yeah," Leila said, "I believe him." "Then what now?" She turned, slowly scanning the faces of her crew. The wounded, the tired, the faithful. These weren't EarthCore's people. They weren't politicians. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were the flame, and you don't give your flame to someone who waited in the cold. "No deal," she said. "Not with ghosts who ran." The console chirped. Cassian, again requesting a follow-up communication. Leila didn't answer it. Instead, she walked toward the main core where Voss had been quietly stitching together fragments of the ship's broken AI systems. "Can it still run autonomous protocols?" she asked. He blinked. "If I drain oxygen from 2 decks, maybe." She didn't hesitate. "Do it." They gathered around the holo table again, just like before. But this time there was no plan for survival. There was a message. They would transmit everything. Codes, maps, stolen tech across the broken satellites and hidden colonies. They'd empty the Revenant's memory banks into the Resistance like fuel into fire. And then Leila would stay aboard, alone. The others would evacuate to the Dead Reckoner and the other ships that had answered her call. The Revenant, rigged to detonate with a core breach amplified by the last shreds of the Trinity, would fly straight into the Dominion's capital system. One last charge, no weapons, just vengeance. The final run. 2 days later, the Revenant drifted into the Relaxis Prime system, the heart of the Dominion. It didn't sneak in. It announced itself. There were no weapons left, no escorts. Its engines sputtered from rerouted life support, and what power remained pulsed irregularly from a core barely holding shape. But its purpose burned brighter than its hull. Inside the ship was nearly empty. Her crew had evacuated Torres Voss, the medics, the engineers. They had boarded the Dead Reckoner, with everything salvageable. Some wept, some saluted. Most said nothing, because how do you say goodbye to a ghost? Only Leila stayed. She stood in the command chamber like a monument, unmoving, unreadable. The earth patch on her coat was almost gone now. The frayed edge curled upward, but still it clung to her shoulder like a scar. The Dominion didn't react at first. They thought it was debris. Then they saw the flag, scorched, torn, trailing plasma smoke, but visible. A ragged banner of humanity's extinction, still flying. Every sensor in Relaxis lit up. Command centers went on alert. Defense grids activated. Dreadnoughts were scrambled, a wall of Dominion steel surged into formation. But they were already too late. Leila opened the comms one last time. All frequencies. The whole galaxy listened. "This is for Earth," she said. Her voice echoed through the black. "For the ones you burned, for the children you turned to ash, for the friends I watched drown in fire and silence." She walked down the corridor toward the core chamber. The lights above flickered. The floor trembled beneath her boots. "You thought we died." She placed one hand on the final override panel. "But we became something else." The core behind her pulsed red, angry, alive. A final charge amplified, unstable. If it detonated at full surge, the explosion wouldn't just level a city. It would blind the Dominion's entire command grid. She turned back toward the viewport. "You can't kill memory." Her final words were barely above a whisper. "We are the reckoning." She pressed the final code. "We are the storm." And then she stepped into the core. Outside, sensors screamed. The Revenant's core erupted, not in a beam, not in a fireball, but in a space-time rupture that folded the Dominion's command relay in half. Waves of gravity, distortion tore through defense stations. Warp gates blinked out. Communications went dark. Surveillance satellites melted like wax in the blast. For 7 weeks afterward, Relaxis Prime would remain in blackout. Billions watched the footage as it rippled out through pirate relays, resistance nodes, and silent Dominion colonies. The Revenant had vanished. The Dominion didn't respond, because for the first time in living memory, they didn't know how. They whispered her name in scrapyards and black markets, in refugee bunkers and dead orbital rings. Captain Leila Monroe. Not a soldier, not a savior. A ghost, a flame, the one who didn't wait in the shadows. She had lit herself on fire and burned her name into the stars. Legacy in the void. In the weeks that followed the destruction of Relaxis Prime, the Dominion fell silent. Not tactically, existentially. Entire systems once blaring with propaganda about humanity's extinction broadcast only static. The gates to their empire, once pulsing with warships and trade, were locked down. Panic spread not in screams, but in silence. A silence that said, "We don't know what's happening anymore." They had killed Earth. They had crushed her colonies, hunted her people, erased her name from maps, and buried her flag under history. And yet, a single woman in a dying ship had reached into the throat of their empire and torn it out. The Revenant became a legend in 42 minutes. In the outer colonies, whispers turned into rumors. Rumors turned into chants. They painted her name, Leila Monroe, on the sides of repurposed cargo ships. They engraved her final speech into the bulkheads of hideouts. Her words, "We are the reckoning. We are the storm," were tattooed on arms, burned into walls, chanted in 100 tongues. They didn't worship her. They became her. Her death wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The resistance fractured, and desperate 4 decades found something it hadn't had since the Cradle Siege. Unity. Ships stopped running and started converging. Old rivals became commanders. Smugglers and saboteurs brought tech stolen from Dominion outposts. Pirate fleets turned their firepower inward to fuel for a cause. Even among the Dominion's own species, something shifted. Dissent grew. Officers hesitated. Some defected quietly. Others simply vanished, their stations empty, leaving only notes that read, "We saw what she did. You were wrong." And EarthCore. They watched from the shadows, their bunkers and hidden fleets, still pulsing with cold logic and buried anger. Cassian Rain stood before a war room of officers and analysts, the screens still flickering with footage of the Revenant's final moments. "She refused us," someone said. "She lit the galaxy without us," another muttered. Cassian said nothing, because he understood now. You can build arsenals. You can hide sleeper fleets and cache worlds, but you can't manufacture belief. Not like that. Back aboard the dead Reckoner, Boss stood in silence at the edge of the mess hall viewport, staring into the black. He held a small, scorched piece of metal in his hand, the remains of the earth patch that had once adorned Leila's coat. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. Because people like Leila didn't leave holes. They left flares, and the galaxy would never go dark again. Months passed. Dominion supply lines began to collapse. Communication hubs blinked out one by one. Planets that had lived in fear for generations rose up. Not all succeeded. Many were crushed. But now for every colony that burned, 10 more lit the fire again. And somewhere far beyond the old maps of the core systems, someone activated a beacon on a long-dead listening post. It pulsed once, then twice, and a voice answered. A woman's voice, synthetic, calm, and deeply familiar. UHS Revenant, automated subroutine active. Captain not found. Legacy protocol engaged. Awaiting next target. And so the ghost lived on, not just in memory, not just in rebellion, but in the code etched into the bones of a warship that refused to die. A warship that had become something else, a wound that could never be closed. They say that if you look long enough into the outer drift, past the wreckage of Relax's Prime, you might catch a glimmer, not of a star, not of a fleet, but of a single ship drifting, burning, waiting. They say it has no crew. They say it moves when no one's watching, and etched across its prow in half-melted human standard, Revenant,